long report written in July 1942 by Rascher and by the defendants Ruff and Romberg describes an experiment on a former delicatessen clerk who was given an oxygen mask and raised in the chamber to an atmospheric elevation of over 47,000 feet, at which point the mask was removed and a parachute descent was simulated.
A series of horrific experiments took place in Nazi concentration camps during World War II. It's still shocking to this day to find out that doctors could commit such atrocities. But despite the brutality, I've seen many people say that the experiments contributed greatly to science and medicine, as the Nazi doctors had unrestricted access to human subjects. But how much did these experiments really contribute to medical knowledge? This video will answer this question by looking closely at some of the experiments conducted and exactly what was found out from them. Scientific research in early 20th century Germany was considered by many to be the best in the world. German scientists like Albert Einstein revolutionized fields such as physics, chemistry and geology, and the field of medicine was no exception. Hans Asperger and Friedrich Wegener were among numerous German doctors who had medical terms named after them. But after losing World War I, a eugenics movement started to gain popularity in the country. They were inspired by the ongoing eugenics movement in the United States, which had policies like mass sterilizations of minorities. The Rockefeller Foundation were one of the leaders of the US movement, and they partially funded the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute of Anthropology, Human Heredity, and Eugenics in Berlin. Research of the members of this institute inspired Adolf Hitler's beliefs in Mein Kampf, and he made eugenics official Nazi policy once he took charge of Germany. He created the concentration camps during World War II, and gave doctors of the Nazi Party free rein to conduct research in them. There were dozens of different experiments that were done, but they can broadly be divided into three categories. To figure out how much they truly contributed to medical knowledge, an example of an experiment from each of these three categories will be looked at. The ultimate aims of the Nazi regime was for Aryan supremacy across all of Europe, and to eradicate all undesirable groups of people. Nazi doctors tried to find efficient ways to sterilize a large number of undesirables. They tested methods such as silver nitrate injections and high-dose radiation to the reproductive organs, which often caused vaginal bleeding or radiation burns. But the most infamous experiments done to advance Nazi ideology were the twin experiments by Dr. Josef Mengele in Auschwitz concentration camp. Mengele wanted to unlock the secret of human heritability. By testing one twin and using the other as a control, he hoped to discover what traits in a person were genetically influenced and which ones were due to the environment. 1,500 pairs of twin children with genetic anomalies like heterochromia, being disabled, or just simply being Jewish were selected. He fed the children well and provided them with better conditions than other prisoners in the camp, so that they could be as healthy as possible for his experiments. Mengele examined and measured the children frequently to closely monitor the results of the experiments. He attempted things like attempting to sew two twins together to create Siamese twins, or infecting a twin and transfusing the other twin with their blood. His experiments to create blue-eyed children involved injecting dye into the eyes of his subjects, but the children usually went blind from this. And if a twin died from an experiment, the other twin was executed, and Mengele autopsied the dead bodies to make comparisons of the results. Only 200 of the 3,000 children survived, and Mengele sent all his data to his professor who was working at the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute. But when Germany surrendered in 1945, Mengele ended up fleeing to Argentina, and von Verschuer destroyed all of the data from the experiments, as he was de-radicalized by the Allies. So this meant that the results from Mengele's twin experiments would never see the light of day, so no scientific knowledge was gained from them. The second category of experiments were the ones done to test the effectiveness of various drugs or treatments. The Nazi doctors had an abundance of people to test their substances on, so had little concern about whether they were lethal. One of the experiments involved giving their subjects a substance that promotes blood clotting, before shooting a gun at their chests to see whether there was any reduction in how long they bled for. Doctors at the camp also infected prisoners with diseases like malaria, hepatitis, and TB, and tested different potential treatments on them. But the experiments that we'll take a closer look at were the ones done to test the recently discovered group of antibiotics known as sulfonamides. The Nazi doctors were attempting to find a drug that could stop soldiers from dying of infected battle wounds. They found a potential cure in a substance called sulfonamide, which was discovered in 1933 by a German doctor called Gerhard Domek and was being widely used to treat infection even before penicillin. The experiments on sulfonamide started in 1942 in Ravensbrück concentration camp under the supervision of Dr. Karl Gebhardt. Dr. Gebhardt cut open the legs of several women and then rubbed a mixture containing bacteria into the wound. He further infected the wounds with glass splinters or pieces of wood to emulate the wounds soldiers got. Each person would then be injected with sulfonamide to see whether it would help them recover. But the intensity of the infection was so severe that it quickly spread to the rest of the body and killed most of the women within 3 days. It would later be revealed that Dr. Gebhardt actually conducted his experiments to prove that sulfonamides wouldn't work. Before he began his research in Ravensbrück, a senior Nazi officer was wounded, and he was instructed by Hitler's personal doctor to give the officer sulfonamide. Gebhardt chose to withhold the drug, expecting him to recover without any treatment. But the officer died, so Dr. Gebhardt created the sulfonamide test to preserve his reputation. So with a safer experimental design, the women might have survived. Penicillin drugs would eventually prove to be a safer and more effective group of antibiotics, with sulfonamides being used very rarely nowadays. So the experiments in Ravensbrück would bring no benefit to science. The final category of experiments conducted by Nazi doctors were created to test how long a person could survive in specific warlike scenarios. The doctors forced camp prisoners to stay inside a low pressure chamber to simulate conditions of up to 70,000 feet of altitude. They also forced gypsy inmates to drink only salty seawater, which dehydrated them so much that they were licking freshly mopped floors just to get some water. But the most controversial of the medical military research were the hypothermia experiments that occurred in Dachau concentration camp, led by Dr. Sigmund Rascher. Many German soldiers were freezing to death, either in the cold Russian winter or by having their planes shut down while flying above the cold seas. Several Nazi doctors therefore wanted to find out the most effective way to quickly warm a person's body up before they died. They took 300 unwilling subjects and immersed their bodies into water baths as cold as 2 degrees Celsius, where they remained for up to an hour. The body temperatures of some people dropped to as low as 24 degrees, and 100 of the 300 subjects died. For the people that survived, different methods of warming the body were tested by the doctors. This included using hot sleeping bags, boiling water, or even embracing naked women. The best method was found to be a bath for 40 to 50 degrees Celsius. Most of the data obtained from the hypothermia experiment survives to this day, and has been cited by dozens of scientific papers ever since. Usage of the experiment's data has divided scientific opinion, as some say the information from the experiment can't be trusted, while others say that it could potentially save lives in situations such as drowning. Looking closely at its design leads me to saying that it shouldn't be used. Key signs such as blood pressure were not measured, and no information about parameters that affect heat transfer, like gender, age or size, are given about the subjects. And one of the conclusions Dr. Gebhardt gave was that a 2-degree bath reduces body temperature as quickly as a 12-degree bath, which goes against Newton's law of cooling. So as intriguing as they may be, their hypothermia experiments fall well short of scientific standards. So after looking closely at the experiments that the Nazi doctors did in the concentration camps, we can definitively conclude that they contributed close to nothing to medical knowledge. The main reason they failed to produce anything meaningful is the same reason they lost World War II, being that the Nazis were operating on the basis of flawed racial beliefs. The experiments were also badly designed and performed on malnourished and stressed people, so the results were always going to be unreliable. Once the horrors of the Nazi concentration camps were discovered by the Allied forces, they put those responsible for the crimes on trial in Nuremberg. 7 out of the 23 defendants of the doctors' trial were executed, and 9 others were imprisoned, but many doctors escaped punishment. But on the plus side, many medical terms that were named after doctors involved with the Nazi regime have been changed to remove any Nazi association with medicine. The end result of the destruction that happened at the concentration camps was the creation of documents like the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, or the Nuremberg Code. So the main contribution that Nazi doctors made to science and medicine was showing us what we shouldn't do.